Hello there. This will have Nigel Farage grinning from ear to ear and Keir Starmer crying into his beer. Reform UK would win the most seats if a general election were held today. Nigel Farage is on course to realise his dream of leading Reform UK to electoral victory at the next general election in 2029, if not well before, according to an electoral calculus analysis. And given the rate of the rise in support for Reform UK, could Keir Starmer end up in the same place as Rishi Sunak, when he felt forced last year to call an early general election to try and head off Reform UK, overtaking his Tory party at a later election? Not beyond the realms of possibility, is it? Although it does look like Starmer has already passed that point of no return. According to the prediction by electoral calculus, Reform UK would, if a general election were held today, get the most votes with a 25.8% share of the vote, with Labour in second place on 24.7% and the Tories in third on 21.9%. That would be an astonishing increase, almost double, for Reform UK from 14.7% at the 2024 elections just 7 months ago. 14.7% to 25.8%. And according to the analysis, that would give Reform UK a predicted 192 seats. But although this would make them the party with the most seats, it would still fall far short of an overall majority needed of 326 by a margin of 134 seats. Now, as an aside, the SNP would today gain 43 seats, and that would be a stunning recovery for them from the paltry 9 seats they gained at the last election. But I suspect that would be more about the collapse of the Labour vote in Scotland rather than any true electoral recover for the Scots Nats party. Anyway, according to the spread of the data, the most seats that Reform UK could win today would be an outright majority of 341, a majority of 15 seats. Now, as I pointed out earlier, this is after just 7 months of Labour holding the keys to number 10. So unless Keir Starmer can halt his party's slide in the polls, this can probably only get better for Farage. Now, Starmer may have gained himself a reprieve after his performance at yesterday's bilateral meeting with Donald Trump. But that success may have had more to do with the letter from His Majesty the King that Starmer gave to the US President, inviting Trump to an unprecedented second head of state visit to the UK, with the royal favouring Trump seeming very, very pleased with this indeed. Richard and I will be taking a look at that meeting over on our other channel, Tripe and Whatnot, later this afternoon. But as ever with these things, Trump is mercurial in his dealings, and a week is a long time in politics. And remember that Rachel Reeves has still got to hand out her punitive budget to the country, punishing any company or individual that has the temerity to think that the money in the bank belongs to anyone other than the state. So once the country's economy takes centre stage once more and the deflection of foreign visits has long been forgotten, we might see Labour support slide still further. And because Keir Starmer has been following in the footsteps of most of what the Tories were doing anyway, something that could easily be proved by Reform UK. Just think immigration, net zero, the rise of the supremacy of international law, and stuff like the Chagos Islands deal. More on that particular one in a moment. When thinking about those, most of the current Labour policies are just continuations of the old Tory policies, and that is not going to help the Tory party at the next election. Given that, Reform UK support can only go one way. Now, I published a video Wednesday afternoon suggesting that Keir Starmer and Donald Trump forge a deal for the US to buy the Chagos Islands off of the UK. Now, there was only mention during yesterday's meeting between the two about Trump saying he might like the Starmer-Mauritius deal after he's taken a closer look at it. But it was great to see Nigel Farage saying Wednesday evening in Parliament that he would also favour the US taking control of the Chagos Islands rather than, as he put it, corrupt Mauritius. Here's what Farage said.
Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I have to say, as an elected representative of a very young political party, I watched this game going on between the two old parties and find it difficult to conclude that it's anything other than a complete and utter charade. Whilst I agree with the Right Honourable Member from Whittam, who made the argument this is British sovereign territory, there is nothing to be gained, literally nothing to be gained by giving it away, and I see the benches behind her cheering, but this was the party that went through, as we heard earlier, 11 rounds of negotiations. The Conservative government was happy to surrender the sovereignty of the Chagos Islands, but didn't like the final shape of the deal. And then we go on to the government, who tell us this has to be done because of legal uncertainty. But of course, there is no legal uncertainty whatsoever. And you know, you can shake your heads if you want, but you know I'm right. The ICJ has no jurisdiction over this whatsoever. So why are we doing it? Well, I guess, of course, post-colonial guilt, a government run by human rights lawyers. Beyond that, I really don't understand it. But you know something? I made a comment earlier about the cost. I promise you, 90 million a year for 99 years with with 3% compounded inflation is £52 billion. That, of course, is madness. And members of this House have been saying, why are we not debating health or other issues? Well, 50 billion quid is a very good reason to debate this. I've tried in this House and elsewhere to make these arguments. I've explained that China already has a smart city right next to Port Louis. I've explained that Huawei are the communication system. You can see now, of course, that Prime Minister Modi is worried on missing out on the action. There is a 200-mile marine park which potentially has cobalt and other mineral resources that could be worth tens, perhaps even hundreds of billions of pounds over the next few years, and we're prepared to give it all away. And the timing of this debate's perfect, because the Prime Minister is mid-Atlantic as we speak. Now, I have spoken in the course of the last week to American cabinet ministers. And whilst they're concerned about Chagos, they're even more concerned about bringing an end to the war in Ukraine, which I think we're all very, very keen to see, provided that it's on the right terms. There is also going to be a big debate about tariffs. So here's the point. Chagos is not especially high on the American agenda at the moment. I would love to see the American administration veto this terrible deal. But I'm not even sure then that this government will move its position. They are clearly hell-bent on giving away the Chagos Islands, whatever the risks to global security, whatever the risks to our own budgetary constraints, and having ignored completely the will of the majority of the Chagosian people. If that's the case, I would rather see America have the sovereignty of the Chagos Islands that are corrupt Mauritius. Why don't we, if we're going to give this up, let's sell. Let's get a few billion quid for the Mauritius Islands, for the Chagos Islands. Mauritius has no legal basis, no legal claim, and you know what? Investment would come. The Chagosians could go back and get well-paid jobs. I want us to keep sovereignty, but if you're prepared to give away this country's interests, sell it to America, don't give it away to corrupt Mauritius.
Listen to the Uniparty MP's outrage at the thought of the US having sovereignty over the Chagos Islands. But great to see Nigel pushing this idea. Maybe a quick flight to the US could see Donald Trump come round to it too. But I would warn Nigel Farage, who could well now be our next Prime Minister, to not throw invective about when referring to foreign lands. Just look at the pickle that got the likes of David Lammy into when he found himself in government. Finally, please like, subscribe and comment below, and check out our other channel, Tripe and Whatnot, link in the descriptions box below. And thank you for watching.